Hi everyone, Natsu Myers here again, back with another video. And in this video, I'm going to tell you why something called neutral language can help you raise millions of dollars. Yeah, so we're right now, as a lot of people would say, we're living in a really post-trust era. You know, after 2008, the banks, you saw that some of the top-rated agencies, you saw Warren Buffett's company, rate subprime mortgages as AAA bonds, and you saw the economy go down the toilet in 2008. So, since then, people started to have a bigger, less trust of institutions worldwide, and in all kinds of institutions. People have a big mistrust. If you look at, different surveys when it comes to how people trust large corporations and trust very large organizations and institutions, you can see this pattern is rampant, and people just have a huge mistrust of large established, the quote-unquote establishment. And you see this manifest in many different ways. You see people, you see this in the spirit, even in the spiritual sector, where you see people who are quote-unquote spiritual, not religious. You see people who are mistrusting of governments, and you see Bitcoin and crypto emerge, and a huge what are the chances of Bitcoin emerging during the great financial crisis? So all these things are symbols of big mistrust of the big guy, of the big the big banks, the big companies, and so on. And when it comes to that as a strategy, a lot of, if you talk to anyone at Raises.com, you talk to me, you talk to anyone, and you talk to a lot of companies that are living in the post-trust era, the ones that are more resonant, I would like to think, are ones that use neutral language. And the reason why is because whenever it came to somebody persuading people to make investments into things, or to purchase products, or to work with anyone, or to make a decision and to do something, what has happened is whenever people assume the sale, so you're too confident. Whenever you assume that the investor will fund your deal, and you're assumptive, you use assumptive selling, it can create something called sales pressure, which is something that is it manifests as a form of pressure that is put onto quote unquote the prospects. It could be the investor that you're looking to for potential funding in your deal. And when you tell an investor, when you use assumptive selling language to an investor, or assumptive selling language to anybody, it makes them, it puts them in the position that they feel as if they have to do something, and it creates a form of discomfort and pressure. So let me just explain. For example, if you say, so if you want to book a call with somebody, and then the person says, hey, I want to discuss with you, about this fundraising deal. I have let's say a public company that I want, a pre-IPO company I want you to invest in, and then I'm just having an initial discussion with an investor. If you say something like, so when do you want to talk about it? Tuesday or Wednesday? If you say something like that, you're giving them sales pressure, because you're assuming that they agreed to it. But then what you may say instead, to neutralize and diffuse the sales pressure, is to say something like, so the next steps from here, if you feel it's appropriate, is to book a call with you to discuss more about what the deal is. So would that be appropriate, or what are the next steps from here? Or just saying something like, would it make sense to do X by X? Or perhaps we can do this and this, or maybe we can do this and this. Just using words like maybe, perhaps. Yeah, the problem is that it may make you sound a bit less confident, but you already know in your head that you may be doing it because you don't want to assume that they're going to do anything. And when you assume that somebody's going to take an action, when it comes to investing in your deal, or even getting on a call with you, or sending you an NDA, or even looking at your data room or anything, you don't want to assume that they'll do anything. You don't want to, because it just it creates an unnecessary pressure. Another example is, you say something like, okay, so when are you going to wire the money to the subscription agreements if you're selling an investor? So those are assumptive closes, and those types of tactics can really rub people the wrong way, especially this day and age. Again, you just want to say something like, oh, the next step from here would be to arrange for the investments so that you'll be able to get insert result that they'll get here. And if you do that, then that's really smooth. But if you do something like, oh, hey, put the money in, it really, the second thing is that you want to make sure that the things that you say that are persuasive serves the other person and serves the investor. You don't want to say things that serve yourself, because if you say things that just serve yourself, you want to talk in the investor's best interest. So many investors have their own interest, especially with inflation. A lot of them want to preserve their capital, but you cannot assume you know what their best interest is until you actually ask them what it is or discuss their mandates. So whenever you want to get somebody to take their action, you combine the first part of using neutral language that isn't that isn't heavily pressured, and then you want to combine it with inserting the end result that they're looking for. And to add the final piece, you don't want to assume you know what they're looking for until you explicitly get it from them. Even if you look on their websites, it may not be enough. For example, let's say you're trying to get an investor to fund your deal, and they say something like, so you say something like, oh, so here's the stupid way of doing it, is saying, oh, okay, so when would work to discuss you investing in our deal? So that's the stupid way of doing it. But then the more sophisticated, evolved way of doing it would be, oh, so the next step from here, if you feel it's appropriate, would be to discuss how this deal could help you insert end goal that they want here. For example, if your end goal is to preserve capital to hedge inflation, it's like, okay, so the next step from here, if you feel it's appropriate, would it make sense? Would it be appropriate to arrange a time to talk about how the deal can help you hedge against inflation? So, because that's way better. And just using different neutralizers, like, oh, would it be appropriate to book a call to discuss how this deal can help you hedge against inflation? Or what would you like to do from here? And if you give them or what would you like to do from here, the reason why some people throw that in is because if you give them one path to take and one action to take, for example, book a call with me or wire the funds here or whatever, you want to have an or, so that you don't put them on a mandatory path. Because if you put them on that mandatory path and they feel pressure and they don't want to be rude to you, because sometimes they have their calls recorded and sometimes their boss is listening. So sometimes they'll just agree with you just to get you to shut up and leave them alone. But in truth, they probably hate you and they probably feel really uncomfortable. They probably never want to talk to you again. So you want to make sure that either you use super neutral language, but if you feel that just makes you sound like you're not confident, then you can just give them an or so that they can get out. And a lot of these things work better with the small check investors who are really malleable, but you can play the game either way. So I'll run through this example one more time. So the silly way of doing it, if you're getting an investor to, for example, wire funds to your deal, would be, oh, so when are you going to be able to wire the funds? Or what email can I send you the subscription agreement for you to send the funds or to make the investment? So that's a highly sales pressured way of doing it. But the more sophisticated way of doing it would be to say, oh, the next step from here would be to send you the wiring form for you to insert the result that they want here. Or what would you like to do from here? So let's say the result, they want to make 20% annually a year. Yeah, so the next steps from here would be to send you the subscription agreement for you to make the investment and earn potentially up to 20% a year. Do you feel like that's appropriate, or what would you like to do from here? So then you're giving them an out. You never want to be so attached to getting the investor to fund your deal that you don't give them an out. So you want to give them an out as well. And then when you do that, you can actually increase the conversion rates because they feel less pressured and they trust you. And when they trust you, they can actually tell you what they want. And when they tell you what they want, you can actually give them what they want, obviously, and show them about how what you do for them will give them what they want. But if you just force things down their throat, then they're going to run away. And so sometimes like a lot of the investor relation thing is just basic sales stuff in the post-trust era, where the point is you don't want to force people to do anything, and you always want to be willing to walk away and give them the out, or use language that doesn't force them into any corner. That's really the strategy, and the tactics can be in using words like giving them saying an or statement for them to get out, or just using words that like perhaps, maybe, possibly, potentially, whenever it requires them to take an action to go to the next step. And then the final piece is obviously putting in the best benefit that they want and the end goal that they want. Because some people just say, oh, invest in the deal, you're going to get 25%, or invest in the deal, you're going to get X, without actually looking at what the investor wants. Because some investors don't want that. Some investors want something very specific. And so, you need to combine all these things so that you actually put the person's best interest in mind, and you're doing investor relations with empathy, rather than with you just trying to get what you want. Because what you want, like, nobody cares about what you want, and nobody cares about your deal. People only would do things in their best interest, especially when it comes to the extreme capitalist nature of what we're doing when it comes to, capital raising. And so with this, if this makes a little bit of sense, hopefully you apply it. And if you want to learn more, what is Raises.com? Who am I? Where am I? And what are we doing? Well, we run a company called Raises.com, where we help people go through the process of setting up and raising capital for their deals without the needless mistakes. And if that's something that you'd like to do, set to Raises.com and we could potentially make it happen.